Custom cabinets are crazy expensive. In this video, I'm going to show you how I saved $13,000 by making my own cabinets using simple techniques anyone can do. I'll reveal the secret to hunting down the best plywood without getting ripped off, and I'll also show you how easy it is to hide all the mistakes you make in case you're a hack just like me. No one will know that they weren't built by a pro. This video is sponsored by BetterHelp. The game plan. This is the design my friend Steve and I came up with. The requirements for this build were simple. 1. I needed at least 12 feet of storage for my library of books. B. I want the built-ins to look good, be clean, and simple to build. Roman numeral 3. I need to take a 0 off of what the pros wanted to charge me. I priced out several different contractors, and the most expensive was $15,000, and the least expensive was $12,000. So here's the challenge for this build. I'm going to try to build this 12-foot wall of cabinets and bookshelves for 90% less than what the pros charge. It'll be tight, but I think I might be able to pull it off. If you've ever been to the big box store, saw the price, saw the quality, and felt like you were being ripped off, it's because you are. It's gross and disappointing. Now, if you're in a large city, there's a 95% chance that the pros in your area have a special supplier for their plywood and hardwood. Befriend a pro and ask them where they get their materials. If you can't make friends with the foreman, then Google is your best friend. Now, there are some places that don't want to sell to consumers like you and me because they're not set up for that level of customer service, but every place I've ever tried in various cities over the last 10 years have been happy to take my money when I tell them that I'm just a woodworker and I want more than what Home Depot has to offer. I usually find a salesperson who jumps at the opportunity to leave their desk and, quote, waste time talking to a potential customer instead of pushing paper and doing busy work. I can usually get plywood that is twice the quality that you see at the home center at half the price. And if you want what I'm using here, which is not the best, but it's also not the worst, ask for, the code word is, import birch. Instead of paying $160 a sheet for Baltic birch, I can get Vietnamese birch for $40 a sheet. It's not as good as Baltic, but for shop builds or an interior job like this, $120 savings per sheet is kind of hard to pass up. Now, to compare, a sheet that is worse quality than this import birch is $79 at the big box store where I am. So for this project, I'm using 8 sheets of regular birch for the top cabinets, toe kicks, and counters. And then I opted to spend a little extra for pre-finished plywood for the lower cabinets, so I don't have to paint or apply finish to the insides. All of that material, plus 2 sheets of 1/2-inch MDF for my doors, and a certified butt ton of paint grade beech that I'll use for trim, with tax, cost $936.33. And that also includes 16 Salice soft close hinges for the doors. This is day 1 of the build, and I'm already close to breaking my budget. Speaking of budget, you don't need expensive tools for this project. Now I get it, I'm using a pricey track saw, but that's only because all of my stuff is calibrated and set up and ready to go. But if you're on a tight budget, I recommend the $99 Win track saw. Is it awesome? No. But it's made of metal and it's actually pretty good for the price. It's the cheapest track saw that I can recommend, and it's okay for beginners. You can pair it with an affordable hose from Jeffrey Bezos that hooks up to a standard shop vac, add 2 tracks for $68, and for under $200, you have a decent track saw with dust collection. The Win isn't my favorite, and it does have some fit and finish quality issues. If you're a tool snob, you won't like it. It feels very Harbor Freight. But I did a video last year comparing it to saws 6 times its price, including this Festool, and I accidentally discovered something interesting. If you upgrade the blade to a thin kerf, you can reduce the load on the motor and get really clean cuts, even through 2-inch hard maple. I'll link to that video if you want to watch it and save a bunch of money. Am I the only one who moves into a house and a year later, you still have tons of boxes that you haven't unpacked yet? This weekend, we will be in this house for a year, and all of the books from my library are still in a box because I have no place to put them. Until yesterday, they were in this corner. For a year. It was very embarrassing when people came to our house and saw our living room full of boxes. So here's what I think I want to do. I want to put a built-in on this side, full width, all the way up to about 10 feet into the ceiling. And then I want to do a modified version over here. I can't go all the way because there's a door that goes to bedrooms. So we'll go half the distance. We're going to go all the way up 10 feet. A lot of people overcomplicate cabinets, and the reality is making boxes is not that hard, and it doesn't require as much material as you think. You only need 2 sides and a bottom, and instead of full panels for the back and top, you can cheat and use 3-inch stretchers to save on material. These stretchers help keep the box square and offer mounting points for the wall and countertop. For construction, you can use basic butt joints with glue and either brad nails or screws, or you can go more advanced with rabbets and dados for extra glue surface. I'm going somewhere in the middle and using pocket screws. It's quick, easy, and plenty strong. I hate using my tape measure when measuring inside 2 walls. I usually end up guessing what the measurement is because of the bend in the tape. I'm trying my best to keep the cost of this build under that $1,500 budget, but I tripped and accidentally bought this cheap laser measuring device so I could get the most accurate measurements for my cabinets. Now, I have no affiliation with this company. I don't know anything about them, but I do love how it keeps track of all your measurements, which was a surprise, and it helped me get a good reading of how out of plumb my wall was. Also, if I had a cat, this would be a huge hit. A lot of people make their toe kicks integrated into the cabinet, and I don't like doing that. I usually mess up with that dreaded jigsaw cut, and what's worse is then you have to level each and every cabinet, which sounds awful. I'd rather binge watch Ben's Woodworking than do that. So here's a pro tip. Make your cabinet a simple box without the toe kick, and then make a separate platform to be your toe kick. You level that single platform using shims, and then all of your boxes can sit on that platform and overhang however much your little heart desires. Then you clamp all the boxes together, fine-tuning the fit, screw them together, and once you find your studs, you can screw into the 3-inch back stretchers you used to cheat when building the cabinet. Then you're done. Toe kicks made easy. The hardest part is just cutting out the trim. Cutting the trim out wasn't technically hard, but I always feel this internal emotional resistance cutting into something that was brand new and perfect, because once you make that cut, there's no going back. Boy, was that awkward. I spent so much time trying to decide what I wanted to do for the countertops here. I thought about buying ready-made butcher block countertops, then I thought about gluing up a bunch of walnut and making a walnut slab, then I thought about sourcing some granite or quartz, then I went back to walnut because walnut, and this was months ago. Then the client and supervisor, aka my bride, kept dropping subtle hints that we've been in the house for almost a year and I still haven't made those built-ins I promised I'd build when we toured the house last summer. So like any good woodworker, I decided to hit the easy button, grab a piece of 3/4-inch plywood, lie to the world by gluing a 1.5-inch strip of hardwood on the front to make it look thicker, and magically fell in love with the idea of painted plywood as the counter. Don't you dare judge me. I know you would do the same thing. Now, it turns out putting a countertop in between 2 walls with the back wall, which are all wavy and out of square, isn't exactly easy, unless you know some pro tips. Now, I recently got a comment from someone who just loves it when YouTubers share pro tips when they're not pros. Now, technically, Jeremy, you are a professional when you are paid to do something. And since I got $19 one time for a cutting board I made, I am, by rule, a professional woodworker. But your point's well taken. So, I'm going to try something out. Since I'm not a pro, and I'm more of a hack, would it be more honest if I shared a hack tip? So here's a hack tip, but it was taught to me by an actual pro who has 2 shop cats and an unhealthy love for Seinfeld.
Total boat, baby.
Pros make a template out of thin scraps of wood and then scribe the wall profile onto that template. You cut to your line, then transfer that profile onto your actual counter material, cut it with a slight back bevel, and you've got a perfect fit. Now, since I'm a hack, I didn't feel like buying 1/4-inch MDF for this like most pros do, so I took the trim material I removed from the area and I made my own template. And to up the hackness, instead of using a pro scribing tool or compass, I 3D printed a scribing tool that you can insert a pencil into, and I went on my merry way. I'm not only not a pro, I'm also not good with the maths, but I know enough that if I scribed a 1/2-inch line offset from the wall onto my template, if I cut to that line and then traced it, which was my intuition, I'd make my counter 1/2 inch short all the way around. But every blind hack of a squirrel finds a nut sometimes. I just used the same scribing block I traced alongside my template, which added a 1/2 inch back onto the profile, and then I cut to that line. So here's the moment of truth. Did I embarrass myself for all of you to see, proving that I'm a hack? Or, well, the proof's in the pudding. I got it right. Pudding, man, I'm hungry. I haven't had pudding since that one time I went to Luby's cafeteria with my 70-year-old boss. Is Luby's still in business? I'm going to be storing loads of books in my upper cabinet, so I'm opting for adjustable shelves. If you pay close attention to shelf pin jigs, almost everyone spaces the holes 32 millimeters apart. Now, if you have adjustable shelves in your home or office, go measure and see if they're 32 millimeters apart. They probably are. And that's because there's a thing called the 32 millimeter cabinet system. It was created in Europe after World War II to speed up rebuilding efforts. And it uses a standard 32 millimeter spacing between holes for attaching hardware like hinges, drawer slides, and shelf pins. The system made cabinet production more efficient and standardized using available materials and machinery. Now, why 32 millimeters? Well, it was the closest spacing manufacturers could achieve when designing machines to drill multiple holes in a straight line together. It's really fascinating to see that a modern injection molded jig you buy today is still adhering to the cabinet standards set in Europe after World War II. Now, how a hack knows all that? Well, that's a good question. One problem with pocket screws is that the joints tend to shift when driving in screws, and it's really annoying. After buying and trying various clamps and jigs over the years that promised to fix this, I found that clamping the box together, checking for square, making minor adjustments with the mallet, and then driving the screws works best to prevent movement. Probably not the right way to do it, but it works for me. One of the downsides to using affordable import plywood is that it can bend when you cut it. So we had to put in some temporary braces to keep it square while we put our back on, and it actually worked so well. I wanted to see what it looked like in real life before we went on and made more. So tall. Since I have never successfully scribed face frames to an uneven wall before, I went down the YouTube Scribing Academy rabbit hole and spent over 2 hours watching and rewatching all of the best scribing tutorials. To save you that 2 hours, here's everything I learned in under 90 seconds. First, design your cabinet width so that there's a gap on each side of the end before touching the wall. The exact amount isn't crucial, so we chose around 1 inch. Second, determine how much, if any, you want your face frame to extend into the cabinet. I chose a 1/4 inch overhang so that my finish width would be close to 2 inches, and that would visually match all the other trim. Third, determine how out of plumb your wall is along the length you're trimming against and choose a scribing offset that is slightly greater than that. I chose 1/2 inch for all my scribes to make it easy. Fourth, add those two numbers together. Now, I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure a 1/4 inch plus 1/2 inch is 3/4 of an inch, which is convenient because I have 3/4 of an inch plywood scraps. Fifth, tape those scraps of block at the top and bottom of the inside of the cabinet and measure the distance from the wall to that inside edge. If they're different, take the smallest measurement, and that is the width your trim piece needs to be initially. Now, this confused me at first, but just go with it. Sixth, tape your oversized piece of trim flush to the edge of those blocks. Seventh, scribe a line onto the trim with some way of staying 1/2 inch off the wall. I'm using a 3D printed scribing tool that I found for free online, but some people use a knife and a scrap piece of wood. 8. Cut to your line. Pros will tilt their blade on the table saw and freehand the cut. I'm not comfortable doing that because, as we've established, I'm not a pro, so I use my bandsaw instead. Now, if that sounds involved and complicated, that's exactly how I felt, and I tried it anyway, and I can't believe it actually worked. And look at that fit. Not too bad for my first time. I can't overstate how much I hate painting, and yet getting a good finish on your project sometimes can make it or break it. And I've seen a couple of viral videos of people using what I thought was a joke and a gimmick, an airless paint sprayer that is powered by your drill. I'm close to breaking the budget, but I bought it half hoping it would work and save me a bunch of time, and half hoping it would be trash so I could roast it on video. And I'm disappointed to inform you that it actually worked pretty good. I'm shocked how good it is, actually. Now, I have no relationship with Graco. I don't even have an affiliate link for this, so I'm not making any money by talking about it. But if you were to ask me to grade it, I'd give it an A-. Every now and then, it'll spit and I'll get some paint globs in the area. I'm not sure if that's me or my paint or the tool, but I can totally live with that. And I'll show you some close-ups of the finish at the end so you can see how it turned out after things cured. I love the beginning of projects, but there's this messy middle that just looks like a lot of work. And that's when I have to work overtime to overcome the resistance. If If you don't know what the resistance is, there's a great book called The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, where he popularized the term. The resistance will tell you anything to keep you from doing your work. Resistance is always lying and always full of The more important a call of action to our soul's evolution, the more resistance we will feel towards pursuing it. And I felt the resistance pretty strong in this build. But when I got to this point where I started to see the first glimpses of all my plans coming together, I got a fresh wind and the resistance ran and hid with its tail between its legs like it was on the defense of the Dallas Cowboys. That felt so good, and inside my head there was this inner soundtrack playing that sounds just like the music you're listening to right now. I love making things, and I love making videos and exercising my creative storytelling skills. If you've ever edited a video, you know how editing these videos is pretty boring and tedious, and it's a lot of work, especially when the resistance doesn't see Derrick Henry and comes back to play. So, being the drummer and musician that I am, I often find instrumental music to work to and edit to. The music keeps me focused on the work, gives me energy, and helps me lock in and stay awake. Now, often, those music tracks end up inspiring the feel for the edit, provide structure for the story, and sometimes I add that very track to the video to help set the tone and push the story down the road. But, like any other piece of work of art, it's not for everybody. Everyone receives things through their filter and preferences and then makes a judgment whether they like it or not. And every now and then, people complain about me talking or my music choices on my videos. And those people claim that they don't want any voiceover conversation or music to vibe to, just shop and tool sounds. And I think they're in the minority because I've tested those videos and they don't perform well for me at all. But that's a long way of saying that. If you don't like to hear me talk or listen to my music choices, I get it and I'm sorry. I'm firmly committed to making the type of artistic and sarcastic videos that I want to see and make, and I'll never, ever allow one or two commenters to shape my artistic vision for my videos on my channel. For the record, I was not acquiescing to the vocal minority. I just didn't have anything to say. Well, the positive progress I was vibing to came to an abrupt stop, kind of like the flow in the video a few minutes ago. It turns out I got a little ahead of myself when I installed the face frames and countertop earlier. I forgot that the end required a finished flat panel. In between the baseboard trim and the counter overhang and the extended face frame, there is legitimately no way to install this. And I see two options for it. One, the hack would cut the panel in half, slide it in, and then cover the mistake with wood filler and paint, trying to hide the mistakes. But the pro would do it right. They'd either remove the baseboard trim, or better yet, they'd unscrew the upper cabinets from the wall and remove the counter so that the panel can go in properly. Now, since I'm a perfectionist and I'm trying to avoid comments from Jeremy calling me out for how bad of a woodworker I am, I was left with the obvious choice to do what every pro would do in this situation to make it work. It'll be fine. Oh yeah. Whew. I was scared for a moment. Now, one of the first sayings I ever heard in woodworking when I got started was, "Caulk and paint, for the carpenter I ain't," and it's true. Can you see the seam? Well, I can't, and I'm in person, and I know where it is, and I'll never point it out to my wife. With the left panels glued and installed, this meant I could finally install the upper face frames using half a bottle of Tite Bonds Thick and Quick and some strategic brad nails. And just when I thought I was on the home stretch, the client was at IKEA and spotted some bookshelf LED lights and submitted a late project change order. With no regard for the budget, we sent $349 to Sweden and created more work for myself. I wondered how I was going to get the power up to the top of the shelves since I didn't consider this. And I found this paintable channel at the store that you can hide in a corner. I think once there's books on the shelves and it's painted, you won't ever see that there's a cord running up the back of the bookshelves to the lights. To make this project easy, I intentionally didn't put any drawers in. Doors are easier, and let's be honest, we're gonna open these once, fill it with tons of odds and ends from our kids, and then the next time we'll open these doors is when they graduate from high school. There's at least 4 ways to make doors, and one that a lot of cabinet shops do that will surprise you because it surprised me when I learned about it. One easy way that I have never considered is to make a fake panel door by cutting a door out of MDF and then gluing a thinner MDF frame on top of it. There's a really interesting video by a channel called Wood Nerd showing how to do it, and he even broke the budget and bought a Slam Simulator 3000 to test the strength of it. I was skeptical, but it's actually a pretty cool video and a decent option if this is your first time ever trying something like this. Another way is to use what's called a style and rail router bit set and cut all of your joints on a router table. And I was going to go that option, but I don't have the router bits for it. The ones I want are about $200, and I was trying my best to stay under budget. Another common way, which is what I did, is to cut all your joints on your table saw. And if you have a dado stack, it's even better and faster. I didn't have a dado stack for my table saw, so I did mine the hard way, but it was totally doable. So which method do a lot of professional cabinet shops choose? Well, to my surprise, none of those. While a cabinet maker absolutely has the skill to make drawers and doors, a lot of shops make the decision to optimize their workflow for scale and speed. And to do that, they just buy their doors from their door guy. And from a business perspective, I can see how this would make a lot of sense. You can focus on the key tasks you're optimized for, especially if you have a small shop, and in 5 minutes place an order for doors from a shop that is optimized just to do that and build it into the job cost. I am kind of surprised by how many cabinet shops don't even make their own drawers or doors. They just outsource it, and it's actually brilliant. Now that option is not cost prohibitive either. I got quotes locally for people to make my doors to my specs. They came out to be about $55 a door. So if you don't have time or the tooling, that's good to know. In this build, I had 8 doors, so to order doors would have cost me $440. Building them myself cost $36 in MDF, about $50 in trim, so my total material cost was about $86 to make all my doors. And it took me about 4 hours to do. So, depending on how much money you make per hour, there's a little calculation you can do to determine whether it's actually cheaper for you just to buy them from the pros than to waste your time. And just like that, I'm done. Kinda. I forgot about the 20 boxes that have been mocking me for a year. And because I love you, instead of making you watch me unpack these boxes, I'm just going to go clean this camera lens real quick. Now I'm done. Well, wait. Almost. One more thing. I learned 2 very important lessons during this project. First, I have no desire to be a professional cabinet maker. Mad respect to those who do this for a living. Second, I need to embrace deadlines and limits in my creative work. It actually helps things finish. My goal was to finish this build within 5 days so that it would be done before our 1-year anniversary of living in this house. And I wanted to come in under budget of $1,500, which is 10% of what the pros wanted to charge, in case you forgot. These limitations were kind of like a Super Mario video game, giving me something to do and challenging me with a level to beat, making it interesting. And so the question is, did I win the game? Well, instead of 5 days, it took 2 weeks. And the total cost of the build was $1,966.58 because of those Swedish LEDs and a paint sprayer. So I guess I lost. What do you think?